You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Maria Andreu on the show with me today. She has a phenomenal new book. It's called Love in English, and what a great story. You guys are really going to love this book. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Maria, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
So I am lucky in that I actually have it written down. I have a diary from when I was 12, and I had a lot of fanciful ideas. Like I was going to be, it's a kind of a laundry list of I'm going to be a fashion designer and an architect and a this and a that. But the last line is the line that stuck. It said, but most of all, I want to be a writer. So I know the feeling was there before that, but I so very nicely wrote it down for myself. So I have an age at which I first thought it.
Were you a bookish kid? Like did books hold, it's some great, place in your life that you revered and honored writers in a, like a youngster does a lot of times?
Yeah, very much. And I think a lot of writers have that history, right? I was very much that way. My mom taught me to read and write when I was 4 in Spanish because she didn't speak English at the time. And so I just have this very rich memory of lots of stories being read to me and lots of stories being told around me. And then when I finally began to read on my own later when I went to school, just books were there's such magic, right? You can go anywhere and be anyone and see everything. And so, yes, I was very captivated with books very early on.
Did you have a very fascinating story about coming to the United States and then learning English, like you alluded to a minute ago. Yeah. How do you feel like that coming to English later in life maybe shaped or formed the kind of writer that you are now? Do you look back and see a connection?
I absolutely do, because I tend to think I came to it kind of at an ideal time. We had been in the United States, but I didn't speak very much English because, I stayed home with my mom and she didn't speak it. And then we left when I was 6 and came back when I was 8. And so I was young enough that I picked it up fairly quickly. There wasn't a ton of pain. Anna
Sure.
in Love in English comes at 16. And I think that, poses different challenges than
Right.
I had. But so I picked it up relatively easily. But also I had this experience of being on the outside. And, I think a lot of times when we learn something when we're very young, we just accept, oh, this is just how it is. But when you learn it later, you're like, wait, why are these two words spelled almost identically, like bow and rough, but pronounced so differently, and so
Right.
just English has always held this fascination, and I've been able to see it both from the inside and the outside. And I think that's shaped who I am as a writer for sure.
English is absolutely schizophrenic.
It's bananas.
My oldest son is a 6th grade English teacher, and I'll ask him sometimes, well, why is this? Because he has a master's degree and he's been through all of the ins and outs of the English language, and he just looks at me and his eyes kind of gloss over a little bit.
You're not even trying.
Yeah, I'm like, never mind. We just won't go into that.
You just sort of reminded me of when I was, I think, a junior in high school. I had this. I was really blessed with fantastic English teachers, and my English teacher played us a PBS documentary called The Story of English. And I remember all of my friends sort of glazing over it, like, oh my goodness, please don't make us watch this. But I was riveted because finally I was getting answers to why is English like this? All of the waves of invasion and French and Latin. And And it just made things start to make sense for me. Oh, I was fascinated. My friends thought I was a real nerd because I was.
So, Maria, after having um, such a strong knowing that you were going to become a writer, how did you start pursuing that? Like, what was the did you do things education wise, or that you know made that happen? Was this something that, or was it one of these things that you just kind of filed it away and then went through life until that popped back up?
Well, so I wanted it. It was kind of a dream of my heart, but I had no practical understanding of how you did that. And so I stumbled around in the dark
As
for a
most
really
of us
long
do.
time, as most of us do. So I was an English major in college because that's what called to me. But then, I remember a Shakespeare professor said something very kind about one of my papers, and she said, "What are you hoping to do after college?" And I was like, "Oh, now I get to tell someone, right?" So I was, well, I'd really like to write novels. I sort of said tentatively, and she's like, "Oh, nobody makes money doing that. You should be an academic." And I know she meant well. She was trying to point me to a practical path. But so there was just a lot of fumbling around like that. And I opened up a business in my 20s. And when a local magazine came to ask me to advertise, I said, well, I don't really want to advertise, but can I write for you, on the side? And so I was always trying to kind of like find my way in. And then really, I guess the path became a little clearer. I took a class in New York City where it's by a woman named Susan Shapiro, and she calls it "Instant Gratification Takes Too Long." And you write essays, and and she put it's a very New York City title, right? And she
Yeah.
puts you on the path, like, oh, this essay would be good for this particular editor at this particular magazine. And it was like, finally somebody had a flashlight, and pointed me in that direction. And I published a piece in Newsweek, and I published a piece in the Washington Post. And that sort of started the dominoes falling for me.
Wow. Did that fulfill this thing inside you that you needed to write? Of course, you were writing and you were telling stories, in a sense, and gaining an audience. But did this scratch the itch that the desire of your heart, if you will?
It began to, like, when you can first locate the itch and start to
Yeah.
maybe like get in that direction. But no, what I wanted to do was write books. And that took, let's see, from the time my first essay was published until my book came out, it was about 5 years. So it took me a while.
Yeah. So, what was the impetus for that first book? Yeah, I'm fascinated with the beginnings of stories, because they are absolutely like magic most of the time. One moment there is no book, there is no story, and the next moment either a character walks on the stage of your mind, or maybe you read a newspaper article, or maybe you're thinking about your own personal story, and it just sort of takes on a life of its own. What was it that jump started that first book?
I certainly share your fascination. When I really love a book, I want to hear everything the writer's got to say about
Yeah.
where it started. And I've had a lot of those since then. I've had a lot of those ideas where a character walks on, or very often I think of a problem like, what if blah blah blah. What if you came to the United States and as a teenager and didn't speak English? What would your first year be like? Which is what Love in English, where Love in English came from. But my first book began as a memoir. It's called The Secret Side of Empty. And it is about a girl who's undocumented in the United States, which I was. And so I wanted to write it wasn't so much that I wanted to write my story, is that I wanted to put a human face to the experience of having been undocumented. So I wrote, and so I did the only thing I knew how, which was tell my story. And I shopped it around and I pitched it and I went to conferences. And at a conference, an agent, a YA agent, said to me, I think part of the challenge, because by then I'd had, like, I don't know, 74 rejections from agents. She said, I think the challenge that you're having is that a lot of the action in the story that you're describing happens when the main character is a teenager And so you're trying to sell it. It's not quite there yet as a memoir, but have you considered turning it into a young adult novel? And like a good stubborn, got to get clunked on the head several times before taking advice kind of person that I am, I filed that away. I was like, oh, thank you. But no, this is, I know what I want to do. And then about 6 months later, the light came on and I thought, right, in many ways, it's ironic. And I don't know if I know how to explain this to a lot of people, but I'm going to do the story more justice when I'm not trying to serve my needs of telling what happened to me, but I'm trying to serve the needs of this mission of humanizing the undocumented experience. And so I began again, and I completely fictionalized the story, set it in contemporary times and changed stuff like that. And that became my first novel.
That's something that a lot of people struggle with is a lot of times the first, especially novel that we write is so intrinsically wrapped up in who we are and our own story as the storyteller that it's hard to separate ourselves from the events, the happenings, the characters. And sometimes you have to get through, all the way through a first draft and share it with some people and give it some space and time for you to get between you and that story, for you to start realizing that maybe that's not the best place for this story. And then you get, some separation and some freedom from that story to tell it the way it needs to be told. Was that a difficult thing, for you to come to grips with, to realize that you and the story needed to be separate?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was the big challenge. I remember giving it to early readers and getting the feedback, well, this scene doesn't seem realistic. And I'd be like, but that's what happened. Like that actually happened, or they would say, well, it would be better narratively if this happened before this other thing happened. And I would get very caught up in, but it happened in this way, and so disengaging from almost wanting to chronicle it in some kind of, order of the way it happened, let me kind of take myself out of it and serve the story. But it was years for me to figure out how to do that, and several iterations.
So that first book was The Secret Side of Empty, right?
Yes.
So when you finished that book and it got out to the world and, started finding an audience, what was that feeling like, as a little kid, knowing that you wanted to be a writer, but could you fully appreciate what that meant for the book, the thing that you wrote, to kind of have a life of its own, and for people to for it to mean something to them the way books had meant something to you?
You ask such astute questions. It's like you really, really have lived this, and this, and you've talked to a lot of writers, because I was not prepared for that. And that was so much, that's such a writery question to ask. It was so much better, but also surprising, better than I could have dreamed, but also surprising. I remember early on in a school visit that I did, apparently there's apparently, because, once you write something and it's been several years, and it fades into the mist, there's a reference to Superman somewhere in the text. And then at the end of the novel, the character talks about, she feels like she's flying over, a sense of freedom. It's basically a description of a sense of freedom. And someone was like, oh, I like how you pulled together that Superman reference again there at the end. And I was like, I don't think I did that. And so it was a great moment of trying to learning that you give it to the readers and the readers make it their own, and maybe find things that you didn't realize you put in, or interpret things in different ways. And that's fantastic. That's the co-creation of the story, right?
Right.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting, and we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web. Dream Author by Sophie Hannah is an immersive 14-month coaching program for writers at any and every level of experience, and also for those of you who want to write and are just waiting for the right encouragement and guidance to get you started. Your writing dreams should make you happy. For so many of us, our dreams are not a source of happiness. Instead, they cause us stress, guilt, frustration, and even shame. Here's the great news. All of these feelings are natural and all writers experience them. The problem, though, is that when your writing dreams bring you more anxiety than joy, it affects your resolve and your productivity, and you end up not taking the action you need to take in order to propel your dreams in the right direction so that they can stand a strong chance of coming true. That's why Sophie created the Dream Author Coaching Program to teach anyone who is passionate about writing how to change the way they build, think about, and pursue their writing dreams in order to become their own most powerful ally and advocate for the rest of their writing life. And more great news. Once you've learned that skill, it lasts forever. Visit dreamauthorcoaching.com to get started today.
So after that first book comes out and you put so much of yourself in it, and then given yourself the space to let the story be what it needs to be, and then it goes out to the world and it finds an audience, and all of that is great and wonderful. At some point, the writer is faced with that blank canvas all over again. Your follow-up book, the one that we are talking about today, Love in English, is several years later from that first book. Tell me a little bit about the process of going from finishing that one, feeling that need to write again, and where this story comes from.
Yeah, from publication date to publication date, it will be just 1 month shy of 7 years between books. And it is not for lack of trying, by the way. There are 7 or 8 drawer novels in between those two, some partial, some complete, some which I hope will make it out in the world. I hesitate to tell this story to people because, at least for me, if you would have told me when I wrote at 12, most of all, I want to be a writer, what the process would be like, I'd be like, you know what, maybe plumbing, maybe some other thing, because there is just a lot of, there's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of waiting. It's a slow business. And so I wrote a follow-up novel. My publisher at the time, who was delightful, by the way, it was so good to me. Just they were moving in a different direction. Eventually they had kind of a big, I think for a while they stopped doing YA. So they passed on my second novel. So I was out in the wilderness again. And then I parted ways with my agent, who was also awesome. But, we just business-wise weren't looking for the same things. And so, but I'm describing to you a process of 4 years in a couple of sentences. So that's, trying and having conversations and writing books and having them not go out. And so it was a long and winding road. And then I came upon this idea. It also had a certain sense of urgency just with certain things that were going on nationally. I'm a big believer that when we know one another and we hear each other's stories, we can really feel empathy for each other and understand. And the way I know how to do that is to tell stories. So that's when I began working on Anna's story.
So, several trunk or drawer novels
Yes.
in the interim there. I'm I'd love to hear stories of those because there's something about writing something that doesn't go anywhere or not yet. Did you know that those were I don't want to say the wrong things to write at the time because I don't know that that's ever the case, but that those things weren't ready for today. And was there a feeling when you wrote Love in English that this one is different from the other things that maybe didn't see the light of day?
No, I lack that sense entirely. You know how some people have a really strong sense of smell and some people have a really weak sense of smell. Whatever the sense of this is called, I have none of that. Everything I write, I think, I love this. Please, world, love it. And very often the world's like, not really. But every once in a while, so I haven't quite gotten that formula yet. But I had an interesting bit of feedback, which has really helped me um, feel like that was less futile. And I don't feel like it was futile, but there is a certain frustration to
Sure.
writing a full manuscript and having it not see the light of day, at least not yet. I have
Oh,
like two
yes.
of those. I have like two of those that I think could get polished up into something at some point, but some of them belong in the drawer and will stay in the drawer. Anyway, I took a class at Highlights with Laura Ruby and Anne Ursu, who were just fantastic. That was last year, no, year before last now. Anyway, it was a while ago. And they were talking, all good and smart professional writers tell you that the work is done in revision, that, drafting is nice, but and I I'm really bad at revision because I'm a perfectionist and I think a lot and I work really hard on my first draft. And there's a certain feeling of failure of like, if I gave this draft my best shot, and it somehow is still falling short, how am I ever going to know how to get there? Right. And
Right.
I posed this question to Laura, who was the one who was reviewing the first 25 pages of one of the drawer novels, the fantasy that I do hope makes it out into the world at some point. And she said, a lot of writers kind of work that through with revisions on one novel. But from what you're describing to me, it sounds like you're working it through in on some level by writing the next thing and writing the next thing. That doesn't mean that the first draft of the third one is like ready to go out, but you're learning where the pitfalls are as you write new things, and maybe that's part of your process. So maybe don't be so hard on yourself. And that was so in a weird way that helped me get better at revision because it felt like every pass gives me something new. Yeah.
So, Love in English is it returns to familiar territory from your first book. It's not by no means a continuation of or anything like that, but it's familiar territory. Did you do you feel like that you have some expertise in this area? Of course you do. This is the kind of you know loosely based around your story, but was there a certain comfort in returning to the subject matter or writing a book that was sort of in the vein of the first book?
Um, it's an interesting question. I wouldn't call it comfort. I
Okay,
wouldn't call it comfort because there is discomfort in revisiting things that were difficult, that were
sure,
painful. I still carry around a lot of sense of exclusion,
of course.
and do I belong? And I mean, and hearing my publishing story, you can imagine that it's been reinforced sometime as an adult too. But so there was some difficulty, but I felt like I was on firm storytelling ground because this is an experience I can give people a glimpse into. So in that regard, it was, I don't know if easy, but it did feel right.
Yeah. So tell me about the character of Anna. She is an immigrant, much like you were. But as you said, you came to the United States at an early age. Anna comes in at 16, I believe it is.
Yeah.
and her experience is completely different from what yours was. Um, what made you decide to kind of look through this lens of picking this character and telling her story?
I like putting characters in kind of a jam, a jam that feels bigger than they are. And while not speaking English at 8 left an indelible mark on me, and I remember it, and it was painful and interesting at times. Um, I knew that it would be a bigger challenge at 16 because now she's got a life in Argentina, where she's from, where my parents grew up. And she has a sense of mastery. She's a poet. She loves language, and they're doing okay over there. But they come to the United States, as so many do, to chase a dream. And so she's dropped at an age where you kind of want to be getting your bearings in a place where she doesn't have her bearings at all. And it's about her first year here and her relationships that she forms and her friendships and such.
While this book certainly tackles and touches on some very heady topics and some things that could be very difficult, you don't approach the story and the subject matter just so grimly all the way through. This really is a fun book in a lot of ways. What was it? What is your idea um, about balancing the difficult realities that we face with some humor, a little bit of levity, and some of the real world experience that's not also black and white?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of conversation among writers, particularly writers for young adult and middle grade kids, about pain narratives, right? And I think there's a place for them. Secret Side, I think, would fall into the category of explaining the pain of a certain experience, um, but also the place for letting characters who have these experiences, like not speaking English and being a new immigrant, um, just have their story and have it be light and fun. And so, at its heart, Love in English is a love story, right? It does have, it's kind of sprinkled in these experiences of not speaking English and the embarrassment of saying the wrong thing, and the frustration of not being able to say what you mean. But she's having a year in high school, and she's watching movies and laughing with friends and having adventures, and I thought it was important to give it to her that way.
Were there any specific challenges of writing YA, and do you approach YA with a different mindset from writing adult?
Yeah, for sure. I I like to tell people, for better or worse, I'm actually a snarky 16-year-old at heart. So I almost it's almost more of a leap for me to write adult. Like, if I'm writing in the narration that's going on in my head, that's 16 at all times. So YA is my happy place for that.
I love that. Are there any particular conventions that you follow when writing YA, or is it just getting in touch with your snarky 16-year-old self?
Well, I mean, I love to read. There's just such a renaissance going. There has been for 10 years. This great work being done in YA. So I like to read a lot of what's being done to make sure I'm kind of keeping up with the pulse, and so that's probably the most I do in order to get into that YA space, to make sure I'm keeping up with the conversation.
Yeah. So, Maria, the question is, with a 7-year gap between the first two books, what is the third book looking like?
So, good news. I hope. With a publishing history like mine, you never grow, too soon. But Love in English got sold in a 2-book deal, and the second book is in the works and scheduled for next year. So I hope, if all goes well, that the next book will be out in a year.
Can you tell us anything about it, or
Let's see. Let's see what I can say. What I can say is it is also a contemporary love story. It will also have kind of meaty topics, but not the same. It's different characters, different location. But it'll be a nice mix between kind of a fun, like you said, a light, fun read with also some of the bigger questions of being human and being 16.
Love it. Well, the new book is called Love in English. It is available everywhere now in Kindle edition or hardcover or audiobook. However you like to read or consume books, you can grab it in any of those formats. We're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode to make it easy to find. Maria, if people are fascinated by your story and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
The best place to find me online is on my website. I have a newsletter. I like to say that my newsletter sending schedule is benign neglect. So don't be afraid to sign up for it because you won't hear more than once a month from me. So I'm at mariaeandrew.com and the link is mariaeandrew.com. Subscribe. I'm intermittent on Twitter at writer's side of M, writer like the person who writes, WRITER. And I am on Instagram at Maria E. Andrew.
Excellent. We'll put links to all those places in the show notes to make it easy for folks. Maria, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you. I had a great time too. Thank you for your time.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started. The Bad Company Complete Series Omnibus, Books 1 through 7. Humanity's Greatest Export, Justice. Space is a dangerous place, even for the wary, especially for the unprepared. The aliens have no idea. Here comes The Bad Company. The Bad Company Book 1, Colonel Terry Henry Walton takes his warriors into battle for a price in this first installment of The Bad Company. He believes in the moral high ground and is happy to get paid for his role in securing it. Set in the Cutherian Gambit universe, Terry, Char, and their people humans, werewolves, were-tigers, and vampires form the core of the Bad Company's direct action branch, a private conflict solution enterprise. Join them as they fight their way across Tissakinnon 4, where none of the warring parties were what they expected. The 7-book series omnibus includes The Bad Company, Blockade, Price of Freedom, Liberation, Destroyer, Discovery, Overwhelming Force. Grab the complete Bad Company series by Craig Martell now. How to Be a Badass Witch by Michael Anderle. Virtutus Gloria Mercies. Translation: Glory is the reward of valor. Fed up with playing the normal game, recent university graduate, ex-cum laude, ex-soccer star, ex-popular, and mostly broke Cara Madano changes her life when she decides to research how to be a witch and believes it. Cara didn't want to go back east and deal with her overbearing mom, so when university was done, she stayed behind in Los Angeles. Little did she realize how controlling moms can be from the other side of the country. Feeling a little desperate to make her own way, she buys a few books on business and one on a lark, How to Be a Badass Witch. That's when the trouble started. Find out just what trouble a young woman can get into when the magic just might be real. How to Be a Badass Witch by Michael Andreu.